Hey guys, Saturday night, it's late, and I have the most terrible confession to make. In fact, it's not terrible at all. It's horrendous, horrible, wicked, ungodly, unforgivable, and many, many synonyms more. And in fact, if you've ever thought of me as a mentor, an expert, a tutor, or someone who just knows what they're talking about, then please expel me, ostracize me, strike this from your linguistic annals, and never listen to me again. I'm just kidding. But it is true that I have a confession to make, and a story to tell, and a few important principles to analyze. And these principles are the same old, young principles that I've talked about. And yes, I'm going to beat the drum again about these very same things, but through a different prism. And really and honestly, there's only much you can do, because in any given field or sphere or of endeavor, you have the same concepts, the same tenets, but you can look at them through this prism, and from that perspective, and from a different aspect, and through a different spotting scope, or whatever. So, I translated a poem by Pushkin today into Spanish. And no, that's not my sin, that's actually quite laudable. Why did I translate a poem by Pushkin into Spanish? Well, just because. But also I was at an event yesterday, and I recited 2 poems in Russian to this girl who is sort of from Mexico and sort of from Brazil. And she said, "Oh, send it to me in Russian, and I'm just going to put it into Google Translate because I want to know what it says." And I said, "Oh my God, did I hear you right? This is the most blasphemous sacrilege against Pushkin and any other poet that I could ever possibly have heard. Google Translate in poetry? Did you really just say that?" Well, I didn't quite put it like that. I said, no, I'll do it for you. Don't worry about it. So I went home, and this tells you how much of a nerd I am. I sat down on a curb halfway home, cars racing on the street, rats running in the alleys, and here I am with my phone. And usually I don't like to translate poetry on the phone, but I typed it up, sent it to my friend Alma, who's an educated Mexican girl, and she fixed a few accents, which I should have known, but it was late. And I think she commented on one word choice, and voila, it was done, which I'm actually kind of proud of. So I got braver. And today, as I was having my tacos, nachos, and vino tinto, which, by the way, 1 point against literal translation, it's not vino rojo, obviously. So it's not red wine, but it's sort of like dyed or stained wine in Spanish, and I'm just blabbering. But anyway, I translated a 6-stanza poem by Pushkin, and I'm very proud of it. It came out really well. I still have to run it through the ringer of my Spanish-speaking friends, but I don't think they're going to find too much, and I'll argue with them if they do. I'm just kidding. But as I was translating, a creeping suspicion entered my mind that when I did the English, I didn't take Pushkin's whole scheming rhyme scheme into account, because Pushkin is being rather wily in this poem, and he's using repeating rhymes. So if you know anything about poetry, it goes like this. And if I confuse you, don't worry, I'll unconfuse you. But it goes A, B, A, B, C, B, C, B, C, B, C, B, A, D, A, D, A, B, A, B, A, E, A, E. These are just basically symbols for end of the line rhymes. So he's repeating himself. And in fact, why don't I just recite the poem for you in Russian? And even if you don't speak Russian, listen to it like music, because there's music to poetry in every language, and listen for the repetitions of the rhymes. All right, here we go. Any schoolboy or schoolgirl in Russia knows this, or at least should. Я помню чудное мгновение. Передо мной явилась ты, как мимолетное видение, как гений чистой красоты. В томлениях грусти безнадежной, в тревогах шумной суеты звучал мне долго голос нежный, и снились милые черты. Шли годы, бурь порыв мятежный рассеял прежние мечты, и я забыл твой голос нежный, твои небесные черты. В глуши, во мраке заточения тянулись тихо дни мои, без божества, без вдохновения, без слез, без жизни, без любви. Душе открылось пробуждение, и вот опять явилась ты, как мимолетное видение, как гений чистой красоты. И сердце бьется в упоении, и для него открылись вновь и божество, и вдохновение, и жизнь, и слезы, и любовь. All right. One of the most famous poems in all of Pushkin and actually in all of Russian poetry. But anyway, if you don't know what it says, go on my YouTube channel, and it's called, I well recall that magic moment. I think that's what it's called. But when I entered my apartment, guess what the first thing that I did was? No, I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't have anything to drink. I didn't go wash my hands. I raced to my computer and I opened the poetry book file and I stared and I looked. Did I actually keep the rhyme scheme? And lo and behold, I did not. By accident, I did somewhat. I kept some of his repeating rhymes, but not schemingly and analytically. So I might have to redo it. And that is the reason you should never listen to me again, because Vladimir of 2 or 3 years ago, or whenever it was, did not notice what Vladimir today did. But that's actually a good thing, because I have grown. And that's my point, tip, and advice, and whatever sage words of wisdom for tonight is always grow, so that when you look at your old translations, or hear you're interpreting, if you record yourself or whatever, you're like, you don't necessarily think that you were horrible, but you think, this could have been better and this should have been better, so you analyze it from a professional viewpoint. So growth, never-ending professional growth is point number one. So I'm actually happy. It's not going to be super tough to fix that translation, although it was already beautiful, and it was already probably the best translation out there. See how arrogant I am? But, it could be fixed. Now, what is point number two? Point number two, and we've talked about this before, is Sprachgefühl. And that's a German word that means sense of the language. And it's very ironic because in German I have zero Sprachgefühl, negative squared. But in Russian and in English, it's, I wanted to say sublime, but I'll be more modest this time. It's quite high. And in Spanish, it's there. It's not as good as in English or in Russian, but it's there. And I'll give you an example. The Russian line, if translated into English, says, I recall that magic moment, or I remember that magic moment, except the Russian word mgновение is a very literary word, and it's more poetic than moment. And I debated between two lines, and don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with the whole story of the Spanish translation, but I'll give you this example. One of them was Recuerdo un mágico momento, and the second one was Recuerdo un momento bello. And both of them work, and my friend Alma, who is sort of unofficially being my editor, she opted for Recuerdo un mágico momento. And of course I argued with her just for the sake of arguing with her. No, I actually thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, now that I know that it's a repeating rhyme, do I want to rhyme with memento all the time? And I don't, because words like monumento, impedimento just don't really fit the poem, which mean monument or impediment, right? So I went with bello. But when I finished, I was like, well, why do I have to be so literal? And I actually picked a line that I love the best, and I will read you the first verse, and then you can read the whole, or listen or watch the whole poem on my website soon. So I went with this. Un día mágico y bello, viniste a mi vida tú, un espejismo, breve sueño, de tal belleza y virtud. So it's not exactly literal, because Pushkin says moment, not day. And he doesn't necessarily say two synonyms. He says magical or marvelous, and I used two, magical and beautiful. He does not say mirage, but he does say «Я помню чудное мгновение, передо мной явилась ты, как мимолетное видение». Yeah, he basically says like a fleeting vision. So I think mirage, brief dream, fits perfectly, but it's beautiful. And I also added virtue. He says как гений чистой красоты, like an epitome, like the apex of pure beauty, or actually personification of pure beauty. And I used of beauty and virtue because it just didn't fit rhythmically. But anyway, that's actually an interesting tool. I used two synonyms using sort of quantity for quality. I didn't fit his personification or epitome or pinnacle or whatever have you, but I used two. Okay, I don't want to get too technical. We can analyze the translation later. But let's see actually what my Spanish-speaking native educated friends say, and if they agree with me or not. But I think I'm going to go with the least literal. But that takes us right into the next point, because I don't think I could say this word enough, so I'll just say it 3 or 4 times. Context, 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 context. That was 4. It's all about context. Obviously, in court translations or in technical or whatever, I could not, right, take this liberty. I couldn't switch moment to day, and I couldn't add the word mirage and so forth, right? But I can in literary. And in fact, you can never stress context enough, because all these rules that we know by heart and have to abide by, they're not necessarily rules in other contexts. Like this, let's take, and this is me just being a heretic, but I'm just kidding, I'm not being a heretic, but take the well-known canon of court interpreting: do not alter, add, or omit anything. Is it true? Yes. In the court context, it's very true. Let's take another context. Let's say that a person, your client, is speaking. He says, as we well know, Venus was the goddess of love in Greek mythology. And you'd be like, actually, it's Roman. So what do you do? Well, if I'm the interpreter, and if it's any other context but super legal, no, but super technical or legal, I would just say Aphrodite, because I know he knows, or even if he doesn't know, I'm just going to correct it. Let's do another example. Let's say that in that same example, or no, let's say that he says something like, or actually, let's do another example of the same principle. Let's say that, he traveled to Hungary, and as he's talking, and maybe he had a sleepless night, or she had a sleepless night, and he says, when I was in Bucharest and Hungary, and we know that that's not the capital of Hungary. So would you correct it? I would, if you know for sure. If you don't know for sure, I would clarify, but that leads me away from what I was talking about. So when would I omit? If he is like, okay, same example, if he's like, when I was in Hungary, in Bucharest, I'm so sorry, I don't even know how I said that, I must be tired. I would omit that whole spiel and that whole sequence and just say Budapest. Again, if it's not court. When would you add something? Let's say that somebody says, as I was walking down Nevsky, I noticed this beautiful girl. And if you haven't been to St. Petersburg, you may not necessarily know that Nevsky Prospect, also called Nevsky Avenue, is the main thoroughfare of St. Petersburg. So I would add it. As I was walking down Nevsky Avenue, the main thoroughfare in St. Petersburg, I noticed a beautiful girl. So is it an addition? Yes, it's an addition of words. It's not really an addition of concepts or facts, because it is true. So I have just shown you how to break the 3 parts of a crucial court canon. And no, it's not sacrilege, because I'm not saying break it in the court context. I'm saying be mindful of what the context is. Who's your client? Who's your audience? What technical equipment do you have? What mode are you using? What genre are you translating? Everything. It's all about context. And I actually forgot the etymology of the word context, but with something or other. Look it up yourself. I'm sure you'll be half an IQ point smarter. But anyway, that's it. I don't want to belabor these points, because I'll belabor them in the next clip, I'm sure. Thank you for listening. Hope it was useful. Look up the poems on the channel. If you like or love these tips, please share. It's my little baby. I'm not doing it for some vested interest, but I would love for more people to hear these absurd or sage pieces of advice. And yeah, I think that's enough. I'll finish my last glass of vino tinto and watch an episode of Outlander, and I'll see you guys soon. Ciao.